So actually you cannot separate yourself from this warfare. You're any which way is going to be a part of it. What you can do is to educate yourself, read about things, know yourself, know the propaganda. That's how you can save yourself. Otherwise you are there in the middle of the war, and that is the truth. Wow, bitter truth. नमस्ते, हेलो एंड वेलकम बैक टू माय चैनल। आपका एक बार फिर से इस्तकबाल है, तहे दिल से स्वागत है। मुझे पूरा यकीन है कि आप खैरियत से होंगे, खुश होंगे, कुशल मंगल होंगे। दोस्तों, मैं फिर हाजिर हुआ हूँ आपके सामने एक और नए वीडियो के साथ, और ये एक और वीडियो है मेजर गौरव आर्या का। मतलब बैक टू बैक 2 वीडियोस हो जाएंगे मेजर गौरव आर्या के। तो मुझे यकीन है कि आपको ओवरडोज नहीं होने वाला है, बिकॉज मुझे तो बहुत कुछ सीखने को मिल रहा है, और मुझे पूरा यकीन है कि आप भी नई नई चीज़ें जान रहे होंगे। जिन दोस्तों ने ये वीडियो पहले ही देखा है उनका शुक्रिया मेरे साथ दोबारा देखने के लिए। मैं पहले बोल देता हूँ, प्लीज़ देखना। आई एम श्योर इट इज़ गोइंग टू बी ब्यूटिफुल वीडियो। ये वीडियो रणवीर अलाहाबादिया के इंग्लिश वाले चैनल पर है, बियर बाइसेप्स करके उनका चैनल है एक, तो उस पर है। और मेजर गौरव आर्या, ट्रुथ अबाउट इंडिया वर्सेस पाकिस्तान एंड चाइना, ये इसका टाइटल है। तो आई हैव सीन वन ऑफ द वीडियो बाय रणवीर अलाहाबादिया। उनकी वो वीडियो जो थी बहुत ही शानदार थी। आपकी पुरजोर गुजारिश पर हमने वो वीडियो एक साथ रिएक्ट किया था। और ये वीडियो क्योंकि मुझे नहीं पता रणवीर की जियोपॉलिटिक्स को लेकर कितनी उनकी समझ है, और वो किस किस्म के क्वेश्चन पूछेंगे मेजर साहब से, बिकॉज मैंने भी अभी अभी शुरू किया है, और जो मैंने उनका वीडियो देखा है वो ही बिन कवरिंग थिंग्स इन अ वेरी डाइवर्स सब्जेक्ट्स एंड तो देखते हैं। मेरे अंदर क्यूरोसिटी है उनकी क्वेश्चंस को लेकर कि किस किस्म के क्वेश्चंस वो पूछने वाले हैं। मतलब वी वुड बी एबल टू अंडरस्टैंड मच मोर अबाउट रणवीर अलाहाबादिया एंड हिज परसेप्शन टूवर्ड्स जियोपॉलिटिक्स, आई एम श्योर। और उसके अलावा मेजर गौरव आर्या जो है, उनको सुनने में तो हमेशा ही मज़ा आता है ना। तो दोस्तों शुरू करते हैं बिना देरी किए। रेडी? Here we go.
Absolutely honored to bring everyone this episode of the Ranveer Show with Major Gaurav Arya. Geopolitics, the politics of the world, the politics on an international stage, country versus country dynamics. This has become one of the themes of the Ranveer Show lately. Major Gaurav Arya has been one of the most requested guests on the show.
Okay, so let me correct my sentence, because I haven't watched those videos where I've just watched one video, and I should not be judging him based on that experience. So maybe I'm wrong. तो रणवीर अलाहाबादिया जो हैं वो जियो पॉलिटिक्स को फॉलो करते हैं, क्योंकि जैसे उन्होंने कहा कि लेटली उन्होंने बहुत सारे जियो पॉलिटिक्स से संबंधित विषयों पर वीडियो बनाए हैं। आगे बढ़ते हैं। आई जस्ट वांटेड टू स्टैंड करेक्टेड। आगे बढ़ें।
Absolutely honored to bring this veteran of the Indian Army on TRS. Make sure you follow TRS on Spotify. We're a Spotify exclusive now, which means that every episode's available on Spotify 48 hours before it's available anywhere else in the world. Enjoy this heavy, enriching episode with Major Gaurav Arya. Major Gaurav Arya, sir, thank you for being on the Ranveer Show. You're one of the most requested episodes. It's an honor having you on the show, sir.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Let's dive straight into it, sir. We're talking a lot about geopolitics nowadays on the Indian internet. And I think, at least from what I can tell on your Twitter, that's one of the goals, to educate the Aam Janta about geopolitics. So I'd love to hear about geopolitics from you, sir. Like, for someone who doesn't know anything about geopolitics, where would you begin that explanation?
I would begin by telling people that we have had a history of invasions in India, and we have a history of fighting back, and the way our immediate geopolitical surroundings, geostrategic surroundings are changing, I think it's time for India to be more aggressive, take the front foot, and actually start not reacting, but preempting things in our immediate neighborhood. You know, Afghanistan is burning. What are we doing in Afghanistan? Pakistan is getting unsettled very fast. China is taking interest. Iran is taking interest. Turkey is involved. The United States of America has repositioned itself. What is going on, and how will it in the short term and long term impact India? Is in a nutshell, is what I would like to sort of talk about, and that is my focus generally nowadays.
What is the scenario for the near future, sir? Like with the COVID pandemic happening all over the world, what are we looking at, say, in the next 10 to 20 years, like according to you?
I think I have very strong reasons to believe that this entire COVID thing is it's a bioweapon, which is what even the US President Joe Biden, he did not say it in so many words, but he did say that this needs to be investigated, and the investigation results will be out shortly. What actually you asked specifically about COVID, so let me tell you that what worries me is that this virus is geographically sensitive. It's like almost, and I don't want to make light of it because millions of people have died, but it's like it's got a GPS attached to it. So in Indian Punjab, let us say we talk about Atari, which is our side of the border. In Indian Punjab, there is a problem. But in Vaga, which is 200 meters ahead of Atari, 300 meters ahead, similar problems don't exist. While there is COVID in Pakistan, there is no doubting it. So in West Bengal, there is a certain strain of COVID, and this COVID is not to be found in Bangladesh. If you look at Uttar Pradesh, you have a strain of COVID which is in Gorakhpur. But few kilometers ahead is Nepal, and you don't have the same strain of COVID in Nepal. I do not know. I'm not a virologist. I'm not a trained scientist, but these things set me thinking. So 20, 30 years down the line, I don't know what is going to happen, but down the line, I think we are going to have more mutations, and this is going to be used further, not just COVID.
GPS attached to it.
I'm saying not just coronavirus, any other virus, because it leaves very little telltale signs. There is no destruction of property. It is targeted and it is stable. This is the perfect weapon, yeah. So I think China and other world powers are going to work more and more on this.
Yeah, we had the historian and astrophysicist Abhijit Chavda on the show, and I had a detailed discussion with him about the same topic, and he echoed the same thoughts. He had his own version of it. He's a scientist, so he kind of broke it down even from that perspective. And I think you mentioned that you're not a biologist or virologist, but he spoke a little bit from that perspective, and he agrees completely. And I think that's the narrative that's kind of making it to mainstream media nowadays. People are realizing what's happening in the world. So, but since you mentioned this this word called weapon, it's a bio weapon. I remember hearing the word bioweapon for the first time when I used to watch reports of the Iraq war when I was a kid. When the US had invaded Saddam Hussein's Iraq, and bioweapons were just spoken of as this possible concept that time. But I think we're living through it, sir. If you could elaborate a little bit more on the concept of bioweapons, just from whatever context you wish to reveal to the public, we'd really appreciate that. So, what's out there? How harmful can it be?
So it's called gain of function. Gain of function is, think of it as a virus on steroids. What you do is you take a virus, you isolate it, and then using technology, you make it more dangerous. So the symptoms on the human being who is infected with this virus are more severe, and the virus mutates frequently. So remember the first wave of coronavirus, everybody was scared, but there was no requirement of oxygen as such. It was normal. In the second wave, suddenly this whole oxygen thing started coming up, that the country is really short of oxygen and people are dying because there is no oxygen, etc., etc. We've all gone through that. What is the mutation going to take in the third wave? So this mutates frequently, right? It is isolated, and this gain of function is, there's one doctor called Dr. Andrew Fauci. in the United States of America who actually
Anthony
funded the
Fauci.
gain of function research in these Wuhan labs in China. And this is how you see bioweapons is not a new thing. It's very old. It's almost a century old. So in the army, we call it the NBC, nuclear, biological, and chemical. These are three kinds of weapons of mass destruction. Nuclear we're aware of. Chemical weapons are also there, and biological weapons. So in biological weapons, basically viruses and bacteria are used. Gain of function is applied. They are made more dangerous. And then through water, through the air, through various kind of contagion or various kind of you touch and it spreads, etc. That is how these viruses and these biological weapons are spread all over. Economies are shattered. People die. And this is another way of making a country weak. Now, except for China, everybody's economy has taken a hit. China's economy has grown in the coronavirus times. So,
That's so
yes,
true.
this is a bioweapon, and this, in a nutshell, is what I'd like to say.
Every other country has gone down. Everybody is bleeding from all the sides. The business are down. The commerce, trade, everything is shattered. Hotels, restaurant, entertainment, everything is gone. But China's economy is flourishing. And I was not expecting this conversation to go this way. I mean, I was wondering, like, we will talk the regular questions, the kind of questions what we are very fond of seeing in defensive offense and tag TV and other platforms. It is completely different, and it has a different flavor attached to it. So Ranveer is my new favorite guy. He's good, and it's somehow this is also very alarming and serious conversation, because what he's saying is correct. Later in future, maybe now, not later, but now, I'm sure that the organizations and the countries have already they must have started working on these weapons, chemical and these viruses and all. Great. And I'm impressed with Ranveer also. Kind of very intelligent questions.
So is the purpose of economic growth, only to fuel war? Like what is going to happen after this? Say we actually battle the whole pandemic and the world kind of moves out of this pandemic situation. What next once China has those economic advantages, according to you?
See, we seem to think of war as bad. And it's natural for human beings to think of war as bad. It is undesirable, and you could look at it from the prism of good and bad. But the point is that war is inevitable. War always happens. In 5,000 years of recorded human history, I'm not saying human history, I'm saying recorded human history, we've hardly had 200 years of peace. Continuous peace. It is in man's nature to fight. It is in man's nature to wage war. It is in man's nature to kill. No, we are at the top of the food chain. We kill animals for food. We rule the world. How did we get there? We didn't get there by being nice. Human beings rule the roost today. They're at the top of the food chain because we killed everybody else. You see, so anybody who says that war is bad, I think is just being sanctimonious. This is natural. We are not saying good and bad. So we are not going there and saying that. Of course, it's avoidable. Absolutely, people die, and nobody wants that to happen. But the fact of the matter is, this is human history. Yeah? We have been killing each other with bare hands. We've been killing each other with stones, and nothing has developed faster in this world than weaponization of normal objects. People used to use, flint and rock and stone to light fires. Yeah. Then somebody took a piece of flint and tied it to a piece of wood, and it became a spear, and they started using it for hunting. So, weaponization of solar energy, weaponization of space, weaponization of everything. You see, today people have weaponized social media. They weaponize Twitter. These things keep on happening time and again, and this is our true nature. We must understand this is our true nature. I'm not, again, giving a certificate saying this is good or bad. This is our true nature. And one thing I'm saying that this will continue. War will keep on getting more sophisticated. And there will always be people with fat checkbooks who are willing to buy the latest and more sophisticated and efficient weapons that kill. So while we may say that, war is bad, and of course it is bad, but war is not going anywhere.
So, considering what the Chinese Communist Party is doing, do you think the purpose of war for them is just geographical expansion? Like, are they trying to expand the country? I mean, I know they kind of already are with the whole Pakistan, Sri Lanka, Bangladesh angle. I mean, so for one, could you expand on that Pakistan, Sri Lanka, Bangladesh angle? And two, could you expand on what you believe is the reason China is even kind of moving towards the possibility of warfare?
See, this is called war by other means. So there is a very famous saying that all war is deceit. Even in our Shastras, and they mention deception as a way of war. Kautilya's Arthashastra mentions 4 ways of getting a thing done. 4 ways by which an objective can be achieved, a nation's objective can be achieved. One is Sam. Sam is by way of convincing a person. This is what diplomats do. Dam. It is by way of economic benefit. Like, for example, India sends vaccines free of cost to various countries. India helps in the reconstruction of Afghanistan. This is Dam. There is Dand. Dand is by way of military force, which is what the Indian armed forces do, which they do to China and Pakistan. And then there is Bhed. Bhed is by way of deception. That is what the intelligence agencies do. So this is a time-honored, a function of the government, how to achieve its aims outside and within its own territory. Number 2, you asked about China. You see, China has never put its military outside. The last big adventure it tried was in Vietnam, and it got hammered in 1979 in Vietnam. China, its economy really went forward. China is the second largest economy in the world today after the United States of America. And China uses its checkbook. You mentioned Bangladesh, Pakistan, Sri Lanka. China does not have boots on the ground in either of these 3 countries. Yeah. But what China does is, it typically selects the victims of the Chinese checkbook are typically small countries, countries which have been unstable politically, countries which have a corrupt elite or corrupt leadership, like in the case of Pakistan or Sri Lanka, and countries which, there are people vying for positions of power even violently. China typically moves into this space. And China occupies this space. For example, you must have heard of the Hambantota port in Sri Lanka. Sri Lanka is looking for investment so that it can improve its infrastructure. Now, China says, okay, we'll build this port. China builds the Hambantota port in Sri Lanka. It builds the Gwadar port in Balochistan and Pakistan, right? Knowing fully well that Sri Lanka can never pay back the money invested, knowing fully well from day one that the return on investment on these ports is sunk. On the day the project started, the Chinese knew. So what you do is, you bribe a couple of senior people, you bribe them, they sign the contract on impossible terms. Whether in Hambantota port or in Gwadar, today Hambantota port, for all practical purposes, is Chinese territory. It is on a 99-year lease to China. This is exactly the same thing that is being done to Pakistan. I don't know if you're aware, but the Islamabad airport, the Karachi airport, the Lahore airport, the Multan airport has been mortgaged. There is a park in F9 in Islamabad. That entire park has been mortgaged. Pakistan International Airlines, the entire airline along with its aircraft, assets, helicopters, everything has been mortgaged. The Lahore-Faisalabad motorway, the Islamabad-Lahore motorway, 4 or 5 motorways have been mortgaged. The entire country, like you say in Hindi, pura mulk girvi hai. This is what I'm trying to say. So basically, this is economic warfare. This is Dam. What China does is Dam and Bhed. So even the diplomats are called wolf warriors. There is an aggressive kind of diplomacy. Africa, you have a lot of unstable regimes in Africa. What does China do? It moves in. It talks to the corrupt elite. And you know what the key is? I sort of tried and figured it out. Let's say Pakistan takes a loan. Who sanctions the loan? Pakistan needs $5 billion. The sanctioning authority is the Prime Minister and the Parliament. The terms are hidden from the common people. The terms are hidden from the rest of the world because that is what the deal says, that you cannot reveal China-Pakistan Economic Corridor's terms and conditions. These are top secret, these are state secrets. So who decides that Pakistan has to take a loan? It is one individual. Who pays back? The entire nation pays back. How does it pay back? Rising fuel prices, rising gas prices, rising taxes. Today, because of this quote-unquote loan diplomacy, the State Bank of Pakistan, it's almost owned by the IMF, which is a Western body, which is not a Chinese body. But there are various parts of Pakistan that are owned by various other countries. Yeah, China owns their airports, China owns their motorways. Most of the real estate in Pakistan, the strategic real estate in Pakistan, is actually owned by China as we speak today. So this is war by other means. This is war by the checkbook. This is war by deception. This is war by corrupting the elite leadership of a country, small country, typically politically unsettled, taking advantage. China will never do that with India. China can never do that with India. It's impossible because our systems are transparent for most of the time. We have a strong political elite and India is a 130 crore people country. But smaller countries, Congo, yes. Tanzania, absolutely. Nigeria, let's do it. Pakistan, absolutely yes. Bangladesh, maybe with a little bit of a problem. Nepal, sure. Sri Lanka, absolutely. So this is how they function. Without boots on ground, without soldiers, just the checkbook.
Got it. We've had
I got it too. And this is completely different conversation right now. It is good.
some army veterans on the show, sir, and one thing I've understood is that wars are won or lost based a lot on logistics. So basically, if your logistics are sorted out, it's a very big advantage for you in war. Now, considering the fact that they have ports in Sri Lanka, they have ports in Pakistan, they have some power that they hold in Bangladesh. I mean, the obvious target looks like India. India's surrounded right now. So say that if there is a war, what is that war going to look like? And what are the possible outcomes of it? If India loses versus if China loses, what's going to happen next if there's an actual war?
I think it's not so simple. You spoke about all these ports and all, and obviously when you spoke to the veterans, they must have told you that they are being used by China as naval bases. So this is weaponization of trade. We spoke about weaponization of viruses, of bacteria. We spoke about weaponization of the social media, space, solar energy. Now I'll tell you something about weaponization of trade. So these are essentially trade hubs, or made to look like trade hubs. But we've had Chinese submarines docking at Gwadar. We've had Chinese naval submarines docking at Hambantota port. And once the Chinese take over, it's upon the Chinese, it totally depends on the Chinese who they want there and who they don't want there, right? Hambantota port has not seen any traffic. It was projected by Chinese consultants that this is going to be one of the top ports in the world. But did it work out? No, it did not work out. Gwadar is a deep water port. For what? You're going to have Chinese aircraft carriers there. You're going to have Chinese submarines there. So yes, India is surrounded. Now, I don't think that it's a simple function of who loses and who wins in the next war if it happens. China typically follows the policy of salami slicing, which is small bits of territory taken away. China does not want a conflict. Even when China came to Galwan and China came to East Ladakh last year, China did not want a conflict. It did not come prepared for a conflict. And I'll give you 2-3 reasons why it did not. When Chinese came absolutely bang on the line of actual control, they were actually sleeping in tents here. So when you prepare for war, you don't sleep in tents.
Yes.
You sleep in bunkers.
True.
You sleep in trenches. Because if there is artillery fire, if there is fire from top, a tent provides you with no protection.
Yes.
Chinese just thought that let's do a little bit of muscle flexing and we'll scare India and we'll take away a little bit of territory, sort of teach India a lesson. This has been the Chinese way of doing it. You stand up to China, they back off. We stood up to China in Doklam, we stood up to China in East Ladakh, they backed off, right? Today we have the Quad. We understand that China is an emerging military superpower and China is already an economic superpower. Its economy fuels its military. right? So say today, if someone says today that is China a military superpower, it's not. Is it going to become a military superpower? Absolutely yes. But today it is not. Today it's an economic superpower. It is using that checkbook to buy stuff, to modernize its army. But please remember, China's, jugular vein is the seas, the trade routes on the seas. That is China's jugular vein. If the Quad, and all of us are aware of the Quad, Australia, Japan, America, and India, and the Quad is very active in the South China Sea. If the Quad tomorrow decides to squeeze and squeeze hard, the Chinese economy will collapse.
Do you think that's a possibility?
Absolutely. That is why the Quad has been created. You see, why is China active in the Himalayas? I'd like to tell you something more for the benefit of our viewers. You see, what happens is that if you see all the wars, they've been fought up north, east, or west here. All right? China wants to keep you busy in the mountains. Because in the mountains, there is only the Indian army and the Chinese army. There is no American army or Japanese army or Australian army. But if they come down to the seas, there are a whole bunch of people there with aircraft carriers and B-52 bombers, etc., who are willing to take out China. And some of them are itching to go because I think China is frankly overreached and overstayed his welcome. China is the only country which has, I think, a border with 12 or 13 nations and has a border dispute with 24 nations. Can you beat that? A border dispute with 24 nations.
Oh.
China has border disputes with nations that are 2 nations apart. How can you have, it's like India saying that, we have a border dispute with Tajikistan, for heaven's sake. How does that work? But China has border disputes. It claimed Vladivostok, which is a port in Russia. It claimed Vladivostok last year. So this is typically how the Chinese would function and the Chinese would, approach things. Aggression, naked aggression, wolf warrior diplomacy, checkbook, and keep your army at bay. If China actually, and last thing which I want to say is that if actually China got into a military conflict, a full-fledged military conflict with any country, heaven forbid, should that happen, China will be in for a rude surprise because China has not won any war in the last 50 years. In spite of all the muscle flexing that China does, ye kar denge, wo kar denge, Vietnam bashed China up very badly in 1979. China has not won any war in the last 50 years. So all this impression about China being a superpower is essentially the Chinese bank balance and Chinese checkbook. It's nothing to do with Chinese military.
So another thing I've understood about modern warfare in general. Okay, so there's a couple of things. Specifically about this conflict that we're talking. Is it true that the Navy kind of holds the power if there is actually a possibility of war? Is it true that the Indian government and the Indian armed forces need to focus a lot more on the Navy? That's one question for you. And the second question for you is, so we keep reading about cyber warfare, bio warfare, as you mentioned. Now, is that the future of war? There's also drone warfare that is spoken about nowadays. So say there's an actual war with, soldiers fighting each other. What's that going to look like? And also, could you elaborate a little bit about the Navy, sir?
Even though I'm from the army, I'd say that the Navy is the most important component. Britain is a very small country. It's a small island with almost no population to speak of here. Britain ruled more than half the known world because it had a strong navy. And of course, it had institutions, etc., but it had a very strong navy. We must never forget, when people talk about Army, Navy, and Air Force, never forget that 2/3 of the Earth's surface is water. It's right there in front of us. And we must also understand that Navy is actually a strategic force and the true power projection of any country. All these trade routes that happen, they happen from the water here. Any military has to be supported by a very strong economy. You get the armed forces you pay for. Let me be very blunt and brutal. You get the armed forces you pay for. Josh, Jazba, Junoon, that's fine. And of course, when push comes to shove, that is what works. But there is so much more to war. You spoke about logistics. Logistics are absolutely critical, yeah. Without logistics, whether it's mountains or seas or even planes, without logistics, you can't fight for more than one day. You can't fight at all without logistics. It's not possible. Now, you spoke about drone warfare and also about, cyber and other things. So I'd like to tell you that drone warfare is, yes, of course, it's coming up in a very, very big way. We have seen it in the recent war in Azerbaijan. We have seen it in other, the Saudi pipeline was hit by a drone. Our own Jammu Air Base was attacked by a drone. So yes, it's more than just kinetic operations here. Today, what is becoming very, very important is what we call hybrid warfare. And hybrid warfare essentially is, how people approach warfare. Hybrid warfare is how people, their whole approach is that war can also be non-kinetic. It can also be non-contact. So, there are new kinds of warfare that are coming up, which are non-kinetic, non-contact, and typically the umbrella term used for them, is, we also speak of hybrid warfare, but now they are called influence operations. And the beauty about influence operations is, in conventional war, the center of gravity is the opposing army, because that is what you seek to do. You try to defeat the other army. But in case of influence operations or hybrid warfare, the center of gravity becomes the population. So you try to influence the population. Like, for example, Pakistan will try to influence the population of Kashmir
yes.
and tell them that, India is doing bad and using propaganda. So this is a new kind of, warfare, which actually not new. It has been there for ages and ages, thousands of years. But now it has become more refined with the use of technology. So typically they will use the internet to radicalize a population. They will use internet to spread misinformation and disinformation. So you'll have the Chinese give a lot of money to foreign news publications here. Massive amounts of funds so that they don't write anything negative about China. And, this is advertisement money. So big Chinese companies will, I don't want to name the newspapers, but they do it in India, they do it abroad. So these, you will never badmouth your biggest sponsor here. It's normal common sense. Because whatever you might say about the media, the fact of the matter is it's also a business, no? And somebody who's giving you hundreds of millions of dollars a year, you don't want to jeopardize that kind of money by saying that, no, I'm going to tell the truth against China. That's not likely to happen. So this is what they do. They try to influence, and this is how warfare is shaping up. Of course, conventional warfare capability will have to be built up because that is your final, insurance policy. But that war may happen, may not happen. We are buying Rafales and we have Rafales. We may or may not use Rafales. We may never use our nuclear weapons. They are an insurance policy. But hybrid warfare is going on even as you and I speak and record this interview. Hybrid warfare goes on 24/7/365. And this is a reality that we must face.
Yes, sir. While I have so many other questions, I think I'll just ask you one final question for this particular podcast, sir. As civilians, what should we be aware of? And as civilians, what are the measures we can take so that we're not part of this warfare that's already going on?
Wow. Before we go ahead with this last question of Ranveer, I was not expecting this interview, this podcast, this video to be like this. Like, this is completely... And I really, really like it, I really enjoy watching kind of content which surprises me. So this is really good. Very different from the other videos that we have watched of Major Gaurav Varia. And very informative. I mean, we got to learn many things about the policies, the Chinese, the process of, the way they expand their land, many other things also. Like, even I forget to make points also in this video. But let's go ahead with the last question first, then we will talk about.
So I think in this entire geopolitical scenario, the biggest, I think, blunder that many people do, and I would not put it in terms of civilians or Fauji's, but generally what people seem to do is they become swayed by propaganda of the enemy. Now, what I would encourage people to do is read about this stuff and find out the truth yourself. Yeah.
Yes.
Don't depend on only one platform. So, the way to understand propaganda is that it looks like the truth here. It's camouflaged very well. The way to do propaganda, the way Chinese do it is, they'll tell you 7 truths. They'll tell you 1 half truth, and they'll tell you 2 lies. So that is how you gently slip it in, so that you don't suspect anything. So figure out what Pakistan is doing, and you can only figure out when you start reading about these countries. Once you start, like I'm an obsessive Pakistan watcher, I may not know about the politics of India, but we can have a podcast one day about the political parties in Pakistan, and I promise you a 1-hour lecture, non-stop, because that is what I do all day. I read about Pakistan. I'm an obsessive Pakistan watcher. I know what songs they sing in their marriages. Right? I know which parties have how many seats in the National Assembly.
Okay.
I know all of that because that is my profession. It's my profession to know. In the army, they say, "Khabar dushman ki." This is the first information that a commander must have, the information of the enemy. And that is what I would request all the people watching that podcast. Read about Pakistan, read about China, learn to differentiate between the truth and propaganda.
So actually, you cannot separate yourself from this warfare. You're any which way is going to be a part of it. What you can do is to educate yourself, read about things, know yourself, know the propaganda. That's how you can save yourself. Otherwise, you are there in the middle of the war. And that is the truth. Wow. Bitter truth.
Major Gaurav Arya, sir, thank you for being on the show. Hoping to do many more podcasts with you. I feel like one episode doesn't do justice to everything you've learned over the years and everything you're learning even now.
Agree.
So thank you, sir. Looking forward to learning from you in the future as well.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Grateful.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you, Major Gaurav Arya. Thank you, Ranveer Ilabadia. I am surprised. This was the fantastic conversation between two. One is a legend, the veteran, and another is a young kid who's exploring the world like you and me. This is beautiful video. Thank you so much for suggesting this video, first of all, before we go ahead and start our conversation. Actually, yeah, people who have already watched this video, maybe they were aware what this video is all about, but me and you, especially people who haven't watched this video before, and we are watching it together right now, so हमारे लिए तो it was full of surprises, full of knowledge, full of informations, and one hell of advice ki guys, start reading. It is not enough to watch videos only. Start reading. I do read, but you need to read about everything. You need to read about geopolitics, you need to read about your history, you need to read about your country, you need to read about your current affairs, your policies, taxes, everything. You have to be very updated. Watch news, watch YouTube, watch whatever you can watch, and read as much as possible. Despite of any profession that you are into and whatever you do, of course you have to read about those things also, but these are the important things that you should be aware about it. Excellent. So that's it for today. Thank you so much for watching this video with me once again, and please, if you're new to my channel, do subscribe to this channel and don't forget to hit the bell icon, so every time I post some videos, you will get the notification. So we will see you next time with next video, next episode. Thank you so much. Namaste.